Welcome back to my channel. So today we have a special guest, Joseph Sciambra. I did an interview on his podcast a few months ago where we went through some questions that he had about my past, and he was gracious enough to come on my channel, and we had a discussion about the recent events with Milo Yiannopoulos saying that he wants to revive reparative therapy. And Joseph was someone who went through reparative therapy, so I asked him a few questions to get a more complete view about what's going on, some of the benefits, some of the dangers. I know that it's very long, but it's worth it, I promise you. So if you want to help support my channel, you can visit the link below to my Ko-fi page where you can donate or just check out some of the posts that I made, and I promise I'm going to put more posts on there. So let's get into this video. Okay, Joseph, thank you for coming on to my channel this time. We had an interview on your channel already, and I'll leave that in the link if anybody wants to see that. And I wanted to talk to you about something that has been coming up in recent news with Milo Yiannopoulos especially, but I want to in general talk about the idea of reparative therapy.
Right.
So so for anybody who does not know who you are, I think it's good to kind of give like a general introduction. So if you could do that.
Thanks. It's good to talk to you again, Francis.
Nice.
Yeah, because you were kind enough to appear on my podcast, so
I appreciate it.
And I wanted to return the favor. Thank you. This is probably going to be my last interview too with somebody, because
Wow.
so it's kind of interesting.
I can put that in the title, the last interview.
I mean, I have my podcast, and I like to interview people. I think it's a safer space for me. I think you're more in control. It's always, and everybody that has interviewed me online, I know pretty much ahead of time, but it's always there's always something sort of uncomfortable about it. I don't know why. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you asked about who I am. Well, I was to put it in a nutshell. Excuse me. I was born and raised Catholic here in San Francisco, California, and let me get a drink of water.
Yeah, that's fine. I have my coffee.
Oh, thank you. It's early in the morning here, and it was in the 70s and 80s. I was it was pretty marginally Catholic, and it was in a very liberal atmosphere. I wasn't raised conservative Catholic, conservative Christian by any means. And then I had some traumatic experiences when I was a kid. And then if we're going to talk about therapy, I can get into that a little more. Mm-hmm. And then when I was 18, came out as gay, lived most of my adult life from 18 to 29 as a gay man in San Francisco, and then to summarize, I was just unhappy. And then I left in 99, came in, I don't know why, came back. I've written volumes about it, trying to figure out why. And then I came back to the Catholic Church in 1999, and then for 20 years, I've written a lot, talked a lot. I enjoyed ministry with LGBTQ people. That's what I really like to do. I don't get to do it as much, and I haven't done it in a year because of COVID. And I mean, in person, you can do ministry online, but I like reality, and
actually talking with people and connecting with people.
Yeah, it doesn't work online. It just doesn't. That's kind of it. That was quick.
No, that's fine. It's I know there's if anybody wants to know any of the details, there's other interviews out there.
I have a website too. Yeah, josephsciambra.com.
Okay, and I'll post a link in the comment section. Anybody who wants to check that out.
Thanks.
So I made a few videos about Milo Yiannopoulos because he was a figure that after I left the church, I started going down a rabbit hole of different public figures talking, and he was someone that was suggested to me. And he was just this political commentary artist kind of person, very flamboyantly gay. And although that his personality I don't connect with in my own personality, there was a way that he spoke that I appreciated.
Yeah.
He's very polemic, but it's like he's almost like the court jester. Like he wants to make a commentary, but he has to be outrageous in order to shock people. But then it's a way of actually getting attention so people listen to him. I don't know. It's a whole thing that we could go into. I don't really care to speak about him personally. But recently he came out as ex-gay, which is already a title that I think he's trolling by using. And he wants to start a center for a new revival of reparative therapy. And you mentioned to me that you had some experience with that personally. And because I've never had that, any sort of therapy that was specified in working on some trauma that happened in my past or anything that resulted in homosexuality or anything like that, I wanted to ask you about your own experiences and maybe some of your thoughts about what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah. Ex-gay. It's a weird term. I don't like it. I can see why people use it because, what else? It's kind of like the issue that Courage had, which Courage is this apostolate in the Catholic Church. And for a while, they didn't want to use gay, they didn't want to use LGBTQ, LGBT. So they had the same-sex attraction.
That's what people say.
Yeah, person experiencing same-sex attraction. It was just clunky. And SSA, nobody knew. When I was writing, I struggled with it too. So I would be writing same-sex attraction, and then in parentheses you put SSA. It's very clunky.
Yeah.
And
it's a way of separating the person and that's so that you can focus on it and attack it.
Yeah, I understand why they had an issue with it, because it's trying to separate the identity and the person and the attraction. And I get it. But I think you get wrapped up in that a lot of times too. And the people that were working with me doing missionary work in San Francisco, we didn't have any trouble saying gay, LGBT, and I used it because that's what people say, and that's what people use. And then
I feel the same way with when I post on social media. I use the label terms, not because necessarily that's how I present myself to the world and say, hi, I'm Francis, I'm gay, or hi, I'm this, or I'm that, but it's a way of using the words that are commonly used in the world in order to make a connection with people.
Yeah, it depends on the audience too. And I would never go up to someone and say, well, or talk about somebody, say, well, they're gay or they're LGBT or that. I don't. If people use that, then
okay.
In order to have a conversation, I'll use it. And then so I got on a tangent. And then so the ex-gay, so the ex-gay thing is, see, that's kind of a charged word now, because it's been associated with like conversion therapy, or like, which, and then some people think like that's shock therapy, or that's some sort of abusive
Exactly.
type of um, like, it's like an abusive form of psychology, or worse, like
Mhm.
people are sent to conversion camps or
Mhm.
something.
Where
So
they use the either yeah, like you said, the shock therapy, or they use the
I don't think anybody's actually used. I'm being polemical now. I
no
don't
no
know if
no
anybody.
that's but this is a good introduction, because it does show the distinction
Yeah,
that uh, conversion therapy and reparative therapy are not the same thing.
no,
And
no.
so a lot of people, when they heard about reparative therapy, their mind automatically went to the shock therapy, or the shaming, or
Yeah,
the bad association of seeing a something that maybe before would have been stimulating with pain, and trying to use those tactics in order to change someone's orientation. And that's not what is being proposed now.
no, no. I mean, when I meant shock therapy, I meant like an antiquated version of where they would actually
They
put
did that. They did
yeah,
that recently.
electrodes on people. Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, yeah. No, I'm getting ahead of myself, and I'm going in weird circles.
Okay.
But I mean, no certified licensed therapist or psychiatrist is going to practice conversion therapy. I've
Mhm.
never heard of it. I think where you've had these problems is sometimes they're associated with a church or a religion,
Yeah.
and those people are not. I mean, I can't imagine any kind of psychiatrist or therapist that's licensed and certified would risk losing their career and their livelihood over this, because
Yeah. And
certainly that.
well, it's just it is interesting, because if you look at the APA website, I did do a little bit of research. No, but they actually say that reparative therapy is always connected with some sort of religion or political movement. So there's always
Oh,
some sort of group
hmm.
that is promoting this type of therapy. And uh, and yeah, and it's interesting, because this might be another tangent. Um, but I remember in my old community, there was always this fear of exposing oneself mentally to a psychologist,
Yeah.
because there was this idea that psychologists, modern psychologists, were always trying to promote modern ideas, and always trying to manipulate people into losing their principles, their Christian Catholic principles, and become a liberal. And so whenever there was this idea of, oh, I need to go to therapy, it was always, is it a Catholic therapist? Is it a traditional Catholic therapist? Is it someone you can trust? Yeah, so it's
Well,
interesting.
the trust is good. The trust, yeah, you
Trust
don't
is
trust.
good, but trust is blind if the person is a Catholic or traditional Catholic.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but here we go. We have Milo wanting to revive the reparative therapy. Um, so just to kind of give an idea of what does
I
that
could,
mean?
sure, I can
Yeah,
tell you. I
yeah.
can tell you. Let me circle back, because I think I got a little too, I don't know. Um, First of all, let me say, I mean, I've read the stories of people who have had bad experiences with this conversion therapy, and I don't have any reason to doubt what they're saying. So
Mhm.
first of all, I'm not saying that, you know, because I've had people doubt and denigrate my story. So I won't do that with them because it does sound awful. I have never had that experience at all. Um, I mean, I've seen mental health, professionals since I was a kid. I mean, there there was something wrong with me in my childhood that I think my teachers and my parents picked up. Um, and people didn't know why. I mean, and now in hindsight, I know why because I had experienced abuse. But at the time, people didn't know why. So I did go to a therapist, and I would say that experience, my initial experience with mental health therapy, wasn't good
Okay.
because I think the therapist in that situation was trying to plant things in my mind or my subconscious and saying, well, this was the reason why this and this was taking place.
Oh, okay.
Instead
That's another
of,
question that I had actually that we can get into
that's the
later.
only time I've ever had that experience.
Okay.
But because it's a minefield in terms of homosexuality, even back then, I mean, we're talking in the 80s.
Mm.
And I mean, even at that time, the therapist was saying that the reason I'm having these issues is because of my homosexuality and I'm a kid, because, because of my environment and my religion that doesn't embrace it or doesn't accept it, or,
Oh.
so I'm having all of this, I have latent homosexuality, and, that's causing a lot of the problems,
So you're
I mean,
talking about this was when you were younger. So this was
as a
you were a
kid,
child.
yeah, I
Okay.
was as a teenager.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did they say that you maybe brought about the trauma? Maybe you
No,
inflated the
he never.
trauma?
No, see, that's the
Okay.
point. I'm sorry if I didn't mention that,
That's
but
okay.
he never got into it. It was very surface. It was
Okay.
very surface. Like he was right away. He zeroed in on, oh, this kid is whatever you want to call it, pre-homosexual or latent homosexual, or
Mm.
he's got internalized homophobia
Oh
or
yeah.
whatever, you know, and he's living in an environment that's not accepting or embracing as much as it could be.
Mm.
So that's the reason why he's having problems. But he didn't look any deeper to, like you said, like trauma or abuse that I experienced,
Okay.
which
Interesting.
is a big part of the story, it's huge. So that was my first experience with, mental health. And, I didn't care for it. And I never I didn't see a psychiatrist or a therapist until much later, till I was older.
And
And
why did you, when you were older, decide to go back? If it was so ineffective the first time, what was your, first of all, like, was there some sort of mental state that you were in at that time? And what was your goal? What did you hope would come out on the other side?
yeah, well, I think this goes part and parcel, and I think it's connected why I returned to the Catholic Church. Because when I was 29 and now I had lived, this is fast forward from that initial experience with the therapist when I was a teenager. And then so I've spent, over 10 years as a gay man in San Francisco. I wasn't happy.
Mhm.
I wasn't like thinking at all like I want to be straight. Forget it. No, no. I want to be straight or that. I mean, I didn't have a problem with being gay. I just was, I don't know. I think when you're desperate, you kind of make desperate decisions. And part of that was going back to the Catholic Church, was maybe giving that another try.
Okay.
And then it was also maybe thinking about therapy again. And so I just said, I, I don't know, it's weird.
Well,
Yeah,
was there a moment? Let me just to kind
go
of give
ahead.
you
Go ahead.
an idea. When I thought about going to therapy, it was because I felt like my life was out of control, and
Yeah.
I personally couldn't sort everything out in my head to even know what the next step would be. Like I wasn't capable of doing that. And I just needed someone to kind of help me figure out what my situation was and kind of maybe give me some options or something. Like I was just missing any sort of structure in my head.
Yeah, I think I can put it together as like a narrative now. Now I can.
Okay.
So this goes into ex-gay thing, because I guess I'd kind of heard of that ex-gay, like not really, but
so you never thought that's my goal. I want to be gay.
Oh no. So I mean, when you leave the gay community, I mean, especially if you live like in a gay neighborhood, like I lived in the Castro, or if you live in like Chelsea or West Hollywood, or somewhere where it's very gay. So I mean, my whole life kind of centered around that. Now those neighborhoods now, looking back, after 20 years, they've been kind of gentrified now. They're not as gay as they used to be.
Okay.
And I think there's been something kind of lost there, because I think culturally they were kind of interesting. I can talk about why I was drawn there. But when I lived in San Francisco, it was the gay neighborhood. We had our gay theater, we had our gay bookstores, we had, gay, I don't know how you say gay restaurant, but they were restaurants that were, owned and operated by, gay men or, lesbian women, and frequented and gay bars, gay dance clubs. I read gay newspapers, I read gay magazines. I mean, you get the point.
Your whole environment was gay.
Yeah, yeah. It just was politically, I was involved in a lot of gay issues, and I read gay books, gay authors. It was just a lot. It was a big part of my identity. It was my daily life. It was my life, and that's not unusual. So I mean, I remember to this day. I remember getting in my car and leaving, and then and I went home to my parents, who didn't live far away, but they weren't it could have been a million miles away, because they weren't in that gay subculture. And I was like, what the hell? That's my whole life. What am I going to do? All my friends are gay. What am I going to do? I don't know who I am. It was talk about an identity crisis.
Yeah, I can relate.
Yeah, I just didn't know. I was like, damn, what? I don't know what to watch
now
on TV.
What? Now what?
Yeah, I just had no idea. So I just kind of locked myself in a room for, a while, and just kind of tried to figure things out a little bit. But I knew, I never questioned like that. I believed I was born gay. God made me gay. I didn't think it was necessarily bad. I knew that the way that like gay had like manifested in my life, or the way that I was living it, wasn't good. It wasn't working for me. I knew it hadn't worked for other people as well, because a lot of the people around me were just not healthy physically, mentally, spiritually.
Yeah.
Whether they were, they weren't, I don't know, but that was my impression. Actually, I got to say, a Catholic priest, I had talked to a Catholic priest, and he recommended this group called Courage. I've already mentioned it. And because he knew I was having trouble. I was like, what the hell do you do when I don't want to say when you're not gay, but when you're trying to leave that life? Because I was like, do people do that? I mean, I didn't know anybody that had like left. I mean, I knew people that had like gone home, if they had AIDS or something, they went home to die,
right?
Something like that. But I didn't know of anybody that was like, well, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be this anymore. I didn't know anybody. So
when you when you left, when you went home, was that when you decided to go back to Catholicism?
No.
So when you left the gay community, it was because the gay community was not for you. You didn't want to associate yourself with that community, and you were going back home, which is an interesting kind of idea. You can see like a prodigal child kind of thing.
Oh, very much. Yeah.
but you went home to try to find some stability or something. You were just trying to figure things out, and you were going to a place that was maybe a little bit more distant, but maybe some memories, safe memories.
That's a good way. But it probably wasn't even as deep as that. I was just physically not well and mentally not well, and I was kind of like, I need to do something like now,
Yeah, and that
or
was
I'm not,
the
yeah,
option.
or I'm not going to make it. Yeah, but then,
Right.
yeah, once you're in a room alone for a long time, and then you start
And
thinking,
the sound is not there all around you, and do this, do this, do this. I understand that. So what happened to make you want to go back to religion?
um, a lot of it had to do with the Christians that I saw around my mom and dad, especially. They were just good people,
Hmm.
not judgmental, not, they just, and I write about this kind of at length in my book, where my mom and dad would have like, or especially where they would say the rosary, and they had people and they prayed for all these different people. And I had no idea. And I just would listen, I would hear them. They would pray for relatives who had drug addictions, that were in bad marriages, and, had lost the faith, were gay, or
So then you saw
living
your name on the list.
living yeah, living a self-destructive lifestyle, whatever. And I thought, wow, this is really nice, and people are praying for people, and lo and behold, my mom and dad had prayed for me for years. I didn't know it. And I thought, I mean, the best example of Christianity is a good Christian. So
Mm,
just
yeah.
made me rethink. I thought, well, maybe I'll give Catholicism another chance. And I had some bad experiences with Catholic priests in the past, and then I had more. And but then I met a priest that, just a humble, nice guy, out of the way parish, just very ordinary.
Mhm.
And he tried to help me out. And he, like I said, he'd mentioned courage.
And what is courage exactly?
It's an apostolate in the Catholic Church. I guess it's the only official apostolate for people with same-sex attraction.
Okay.
People identify as LGBTQ. And the, the why I went was, I was just like, I didn't know. I was desperate. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go, and I'll go.
Well, you probably saw in that group, you're like, well, maybe there's other people who are like me.
That's it. That's what I think was in my subconscious. So I went to San Francisco, and had been in a number of months, and that's where the meeting was. And I was like, that was right. It was kind of like, I wanted to know, like, I wasn't the only one. There's other guys here. So it was a cool group. I was probably the youngest. I was 29. And then, there was guys in their 30s, 50s, 60s, 70s. It was like
Okay.
cultural. It was cool. Different backgrounds, but they all had one thing in common, which they weren't happy in the gay, I don't like to say the gay lifestyle, but they weren't happy being gay.
Mm.
There was something lacking. There was something unsatisfying about it.
So
And I was like,
they had tried to live a gay lifestyle, which is interesting because even I know you even saying gay lifestyle, for me too, I have trouble saying that because
what is it?
well, it's like
Yeah,
yeah,
what is it?
exactly. There's like the gay lifestyle that's presented through social media and the media in general, movies, culture, and that type of lifestyle I would never feel comfortable in because it's so far removed from the person that I am and how I want to live
See,
my life.
that's the difference between you and me. I loved it. Everything that the gay lifestyle, like, you could see the stereotypical, that's
Yeah, it's just interesting. It's a lot of people actually think that I'm in that lifestyle now, that I'm going to the gay places, getting drunk, doing whatever crazy thing they can imagine in their head, which the actual people are doing worse. Um, but whatever they can imagine, that's what I'm doing. And I mean, I try to be open and express exactly kind of what my principles are. Like as a person, I haven't really changed, but but in this group, this courage group, what was their mission? What were they trying to do with the gay people? Like, were they just trying to give a safe kind of area where people could connect and exchange stories, or because it was connected with Catholicism, what was the purpose of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't really know.
So it wasn't clear. Interesting.
Yeah, well, I think the one thing that was made evident is that you got to be chaste.
Okay.
You can't have sex.
Yes.
I
So
mean, that
any
was
sort of acting upon any homosexual feeling, sexual feeling is a big no-no. It's a
yes,
sin,
yes,
hell, all that.
yeah, which is fine. The issue and this will lead right in. This is a good segue. I didn't plan it, but this will go right into why I sought out therapy. Was that I mean, I liked the meetings because some of the guys, I would say a lot of the guys were sort of still living like in the gay ghetto or in gay culture. They might have lived in the Castro. Most of their friends were gay. It's not like me where I had it was like a more of a break where I had left
Mhm,
San Francisco and I wasn't
mhm.
participating anymore. A lot
They
of
were
them
still in a
still,
process.
and I don't know if any of them like ever did. I mean, logistically or financially, people a lot of times can't move or can't quit their job, or
Right.
especially if they've been in the gay culture for a long time. So, but it was kind of like a mental thing where they weren't, maybe a relationship hadn't worked out and they weren't looking to get into another one. They were just by themselves and they
Mhm.
were chaste,
Okay.
which is cool. And then they went back to the sacraments and the mass. The issue I had with the meetings was they were very structured in a certain way, and you didn't really deviate from that structure. And
Okay.
that's not me. Um, so I mean, I had gone, so my previous experience with like self-help groups or group therapy groups was like AA. I had gone with a
I
friend
was
and it
gonna
was,
ask.
yeah, it was a little different. I liked it more. People got up, told a little story,
Okay.
their story. And then sometimes people would say something or talk about, what they heard or whatever,
Mhm.
or support and encourage. Whereas where encouraged, people would talk. There was sort of a round table and people would talk about their experiences since the last meetings. And some of the stories were just really heartbreaking, where somebody, not to be graphic, had gone to a public park or something and cruised and
Okay.
picked somebody up, and they were so torn up about it, what they had done, and I was like, wow, okay, maybe I need to say something, or well, that's not permitted within the group. And
Oh,
I was
so
like, this person is like in a crisis. Let's stop everything. Let's focus on him, and let's help him. Let's think about it. Let's talk about it. Well, that
how would they help somebody like that? Was
I don't
the mere
know.
fact of expressing it to the group, was that the what would I mean, what was the solution? Like, was there, you need to pray more, you need to, like, what were they telling the people
I
there?
I don't know.
Okay, so it just wasn't organized.
And I don't know if it's organized. I mean, it's like I said, it's structured, but I don't know if it was addressed.
Well, they
So
didn't, that this is
they
something
they
that
moved on. They moved on.
well, this is the thing with a lot of Catholic organizations, or even just one-on-one with the priest, they don't have answers. They don't know what to say. And the sooner, this is from my experience and even what I learned in the seminary, um, the sooner that you can stop talking about this, the better, because everyone felt uncomfortable. And I would talk to, I've talked to over 20 priests in my experience about this specific thing. I didn't just go up and talk to any priest and say, here's my whole story, but any priest that was my confessor, I gave them kind of a summary of my past. And I've made so many general confessions, which is going back from as far as you can remember and saying all of your sins again, which is supposed to make you have more contrition and receive more grace from God. I did so many of those in my experience with Catholicism. So I've opened up to a lot of priests, and either they never talked about it, they never specifically said that, or they gave a very general, so for sins against purity, you should do this. But they never wanted to touch on the fact of the homosexuality aspect, because it made them all uncomfortable, and they just didn't have the tools. They didn't have an idea of what to say. That was, go ahead.
Well, the aspect of that that's super troubling in your story is that you had a religious vocation. I mean, there's really an impetus.
I didn't get the information that
to address.
Who did?
There was really the impetus to address it now. And going back to Courage real quick, I don't want to bash them, but because I did receive benefit from my involvement with my participation with them. And I think, what I've heard from some guys that are still involved with Courage is, I think what they've done that I think is smart is that after a Courage meeting, sometimes they'll get together in sort of like a separate meeting, like maybe at somebody's house or something, and then delve
but not alone, because that's a temptation.
Or delve deeper into these issues. No. So that got me thinking. I was like, because I heard other stories, and these stories were mine too. I used to do all that kind of stuff. I did everything under the sun. And I was thinking, why am I constantly drawn to act out sexually with other men? Why is there this attraction? Why? I started asking all these whys. And I mean, within Courage, there wasn't an answer with that. It wasn't explored.
So you knew, so in your head at that point, so before you had accepted being gay, you lived the lifestyle as we have so clearly defined what that is. And then you come to this new way of living. And so now
I hadn't come to that yet.
Well, you're face to face with something that's different, right? And you're trying to connect yourself with this new way of living and seeing how it relates to you. So
also Francis, I mean, I don't want to say the Catholic Church, but the Catholic Church was asking me to be chaste, to not have sex. And part and parcel was that you have to explore, well, why in the first place are you attracted to that? You can't just say, well, I'm not going to do this thing anymore. Just like somebody's maybe that overeats or drinks, you could just say, well, I'm not going to drink anymore, or I'm not going to overeat anymore. But don't you think in order to really address that issue, you have to explore, well, why was I overeating, or why was I drinking?
So at that point, you were seeing it more as an addiction. So something that was within you that had to be fixed. Or this was where I was leading in my last what I was saying, that before you had accepted it, but then how were you seeing your homosexuality at that point?
I wasn't seeing it as probably like an addiction. No.
Okay.
I think I was still seeing it I don't know. It didn't go that deep. I just was trying to figure out, well, why? And then hearing the stories from other guys who were still, because I wasn't acting out at that time. The other guys, I was like, why? There must be something like deeply psychological here that's going on. And I have no background in psychology or psychiatry, but I just think there's something going on here. It's not just a matter of a sex addiction or something. There's something else. And I wanted to explore that. And I picked up a book. I found a book by Dr. Joseph Nicolosi. God rest his soul. You know, even after his death, he's still a controversial person. But I picked up a book by him and met him. So.
Well, so at that point you saw homosexuality, at least in the process, you saw that Catholicism was saying that homosexuality was something wrong. So did you see that in yourself as, okay, this is something deeply psychological, like you said, but it's something that had to have been triggered by something off?
I think I just instinctively knew. That's like calling to like see things in a big picture, which I didn't do.
Okay.
I think instinctively I knew that the way I was living my life wasn't working, and
The gay lifestyle, right?
Yeah, I had to do something different. I just wasn't going to make it. I wasn't
Right.
going to be around.
Right.
But
I understand
so yeah, so part of it was stopping
that.
the sexual activity, but then I knew it wasn't going to work. I knew there were other issues with me,
Yeah, just from your memories.
and I could see that there were other issues with other guys too, and I could see that in the group, and then I
Okay.
read Dr. Nicolosi' book, and that book was like really a revelation to me.
I actually don't know about the book. Maybe that's something I can look at after.
I should say books. He wrote several.
Okay.
So
I know the name, but I never read the book. But so then,
and a lot of his, just real quick, a lot of his work was case studies. So if you know what that is, it's like he worked with a lot of people, homosexual men. So a lot of his books were just case studies where he would just give them a fictitious name, you know, Bob, Jim, Tom, whatever. And he would go through these case studies. And I was reading about, and this is the first time, this is another tangent, but I was reading these stories about gay men, their childhood, what they experienced. I was like, damn, this is a lot like me. I was like, this is my story. And it was like page after page after page. And then things start to click. And then I was like, you know what? All the years I spent in the gay life, you know, we would talk sometimes, me and my friends, about something, not even our childhood, but just something would come up just like naturally. And I was like, yeah, there was a lot of this stuff going on, either past abuse, past trauma. And it at the time, sometimes it did click as a little odd, but, or I would meet somebody's mother or their father, and I was like, there's something strange here, or, but when you read it, and then you read it after case, it was like, yes, there's a consistent, there are consistent like markers here that seem to identify, or there's a lot of things in common that gay men share, especially in their childhood.
Yeah, and that's something that Milo brought up in his article, that there's a lot of things that are not 100% present in 100% of the cases, but are things that are common, and that's basically what he wants to focus on with his whole reparative therapy thing. Specifically, that being trauma, past trauma with, we'll say for YouTube, we'll say SA. I think a lot of people understand what that is. So
Yeah.
So at what point did you decide to go to therapy?
Right when I was reading Dr. Nichols's book.
Okay. And you thought, I need someone like this guy to look at my look at my life.
I just thought, yeah, I go, this is interesting. This is like something that I want to explore.
Okay.
And then I had no idea how much. I mean, it depends on, everybody's different, and it depends on how much baggage. No, I hate that term, but it depends on just what's there, and how deep you're willing to explore that. And it was a lot. I had no idea, but
Yeah, I remember well, as I've been um, as I've been doing a lot of research, I I've come across a lot of studies that have said that there are similarities between there's a lot of things that can influence one's sexual expression. That's what they say, but their orientation and um, but a lot of them, it seems like they want to stay clear, far away from the idea that uh, there are specific markers that are found in all gay people. It seems like they want to say, oh, there's similarities, but don't forget this, don't forget this. There's so many variants and da da da. And and a lot of the studies have actually said, because when I heard Milo say that, we're going to focus on the trauma, I look back because I'm automatically reflexive, and I always take what I hear and apply it to my own life and my own experience,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and even just stories that I've heard from different gay men, like I can't relate. I mean, there's obviously, if I really want to like draw out the water, I can see like, well, that wasn't perfect, or that could have been better. My father could have been more masculine, or my mother could have been less dominant, or like you can search for clues and markers when you really want to see them. And but some of these articles were saying that less than 50%, which is still high, I think it was like 47% of gay men and women have experienced sexual trauma from their past, and that's a lot. But it's still not
It's
even.
yeah, it's even more than that. So one study found that 46% of gay men had been molested by someone of the same sex.
But it seems like,
Now that number is 7% in straight men.
yeah, I also saw that it was very low for straight men. Um, but it seemed like to me that you have the two extremes. You have the people who want to stay far away from giving any sort of um, uh, definition or um, like causal relation
Yeah.
to homosexuality and trauma. So you have that side, and then you have the people who say that something had to have happened, and it was you probably don't even remember, but it happened to you that caused you to be that way. And you have those two extremes, and depending on who you read, it's like that's what they're going to focus on. And it's hard for me kind of trying to just weed through everything to figure out what exactly is happening.
Maybe I can help a little bit. Now, the people in this field that I've read that I think are good and they're balanced. I think they admit that there's maybe something biological in terms of homosexuality, but there's also definitely something environmental.
Yep.
And I think where the biological element comes in, and I mean, just looking at my life and some other case studies and people I've known, is that it's often an issue of temperament, where it's like a sensitivity there, where things affect some people in a certain way, or they affect some people more profoundly than others. Like just in terms of like, again, I'll just use my life. Like when I got teased as a boy, I was not the only boy that was teased.
Right.
I mean, I had friends that were also kind of rejects or outsiders. They're also teased, but it didn't affect them as profoundly as it did me. I mean, it seriously bothered me.
Mm.
And I know because I've talked to them, years later, and it didn't bother them that much. I mean, it was kind of part and parcel of being a boy.
Mm.
So that's temperament, and that's probably something that I just was born that way. I was born maybe a bit more sensitive or a bit more thin-skinned. I don't know.
Mm.
And then the trauma part, I think, can come in with different people. And then later you have an incident or incidents of abuse and trauma. Yeah, people got to remember male homosexuality is not that common. It's about 2%.
Right,
I mean, I know
exactly.
people want to inflate it to 10,
I know
and then
people.
they've done surveys and they say, oh, it's 20%. It's not that common.
Well, the
So, I
thing
mean,
that I
oh, sorry.
no, no, no. Well, I wanted to say that um, with people who this is something like with any of these topics, I try to keep a very open mind and try to listen to everybody's side and figure out what's happening. But I I see the extremes and I see some elements of the truth, but it's obviously not 100% what happens. I mean, even with the statistics, you said 47, 46%
Yeah.
had experienced some sort of trauma. Um, and
Same
I'm
sex molestation.
molestation, yeah. So, I mean, I think that's what they refer to when they say trauma from the past. But and I'm sure that there's people out there who have had such a impactful traumatic event like that in their past that they're very confused person. I don't even want to say confused, but they're living in this they're living from that trauma and going back through the therapy and everything actually is a way for them to put the puzzle pieces together and figure things out and maybe realize that a lot of how they're acting in the present is influenced by that traumatic event without even realizing it. I'm sure there's people out there, and I've heard stories, I've read stories, I know that it happens. Um, so
I agree. But I think it's unfortunate. And okay, I think I don't think gay people should be thrown into therapy, against their will. But I think people that want to explore different aspects of their life, and if they happen to be gay, I think they should be free to do so. But
yeah,
now it's been so stigmatized, where, oh, you're trying to convert and be straight, or you're
right,
going to
exactly.
conversion there, so now that's been stigmatized. But but then I also understand why some people in the gay community have stigmatized that, because there was a time, we have to remember, and this is kind of the background, that homosexuality was like deeply pathologized.
Yeah,
you know
it was a
it's-
mental disorder.
yeah. So I mean, I understand that. I understand the reaction, the strong counter reaction, but people should be free. Adult people should be free to explore any aspect of their mental health that they want to.
And
That's
also when there a lot of the people who are against any sort of therapy, not even if they're I mean, if you go to something like conversion therapy or reparative therapy, the idea is
yeah,
repair it, fix it. But even if you just think of, I'm going to go to therapy, um, there's there's almost like this. If you're afraid of being hurt by people trying to change you, then those people who avoid the therapy in general, they also might be damaging themselves or cutting off a possible way of healing from their trauma that really did happen and really helping them because they're afraid of we're just going to change you, we're going to fix you, and then in the end you won't be who you are now because it's all from your past, it's all from your trauma.
yeah. And when I've gone to reparative therapy, the therapists have always said, you're in the driver's seat. We're going to explore, this can go in any direction that you want. I'm not going to, implant things into your brain, about, we're going to make you straight or whatever, or in 10 years, you're going to be married with a family.
Right.
And I've never, ever, I should say this, I probably didn't say it, I've never gone into reparative therapy or therapy with the intention of being straight or getting rid of something. I simply, like I said earlier, when I was at those courage meetings, and that sort of got my wheels turning in my brain, is I wanted to explore my homosexuality. I wanted to know why. And that's what I did in therapy. And then in the process of doing that, I discovered, I don't want to say about discovered, but I did, because I think a lot of things in my past were um, not denied, but I hadn't addressed them. So I
Like you
kind of,
kind of put them in a box and tried
yeah,
to forget about them.
you move on. So there's like a
Yeah.
process of excavation where you keep digging deeper, and you find different layers. And
Were those sessions, were they connected in any way to religion?
no,
Okay, so it wasn't even there was no sort of like doctrinal anything. It was all just therapy. It was going back. So
well, because some of the abuse that I experienced as a kid was experienced within the Catholic Church, that's where it did play in a part. And then when I came back to the church, there were instances of like, oh, I hate the word re-abuse or re-victimization. So then religion did play a part, because I mean, there was a certain mindset, going on in my brain, where I think I did seek out authority figures, especially male, uh, uh, you know, in my life, and that's not always that's not a good thing.
well,
Especially if you've been abused in the past, because a lot of times, if you're that kind of needy person, you set yourself up to be abused again. So it
well,
was
I
it was
mean,
a lot of breaking patterns. And
I can I can relate to that in the sense. I mean, never would I say that having opening yourself up is the cause of the abuse. I would never say that, because the person who is in the position of authority should never take advantage of that authority, no matter if the person's there, like, you know, but I would never ever say that. But it definitely, um, but I can relate to that. So in the therapy, it was just like, okay, religion comes into play when it's in context. So when we're talking about a particular thing that happened to you in your religious environment, then we'll discover, then we'll talk about what that religion,
yeah,
what the, yeah, the context.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I wasn't trying to blame people that have been victimized, but I see, I saw in therapy that a lot of times I put myself in situations where I was really vulnerable to abuse, and I don't do that anymore.
yeah, I mean, it's something that, like, anybody who, um, I think it's just the natural process. Anybody who's been through a situation like that, they look at what did they do, even though the actual act wasn't them and it will never be them. It's always good to see, well, I was in, the alleyway at night after drinking with no clothes on, or so, whatever the, maybe that's not the best situation to be in for the future, even though the actual act was not the victim's fault at all. But it's interesting. The reason why I'm asking you about the connection with the therapy and religion is because I think that, like we said before in the beginning, any of these conversion, reparative therapy, the people who promote that, a lot of it is connected with
I,
religion.
I think, Francis, I think sometimes that's in the evangelical space that
That's
happens.
why I think this is really interesting, because we have
I'm not an
Milo.
expert.
Well, it was never, the conversion therapy was obviously, for me, not even an option. It wasn't even like in my dictionary. Like it just isn't a Catholic idea. But then we have Milo talking about reparative therapy. He made that distinction between conversion and reparative, which we talked about. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think that actually means for a Catholic? Do you think, like, how would a Catholic approach that type of therapy?
I I know that, and I don't want to speak for them, but I know Courage has never really taken a definitive like stand on reparative therapy. I think they've said, they don't encourage and they don't dissuade people from seeking it out, which I think is a good stand.
It's the easy option.
Yeah, I know. I think it's a pretty good position to take, for what they do, which is a support group. I think inevitable. I mean, this is probably where I was only like really involved with Courage for about 3 years. Is that, I mean, as a Catholic, because the Catholic Church is telling, I don't know if it's requesting, it's saying that you need to be chaste. You got to be chaste. If you have yeah, I mean, it's in the catechism. It doesn't say a lot about homosexuality in the catechism, but you got to be chaste. So, and disinterested friendship and all that stuff. And I mean, so people have grappled with that in different ways. And there was I remember for a few years ago, there was that spiritual friendship group. I don't know if it was a group. Do you remember them? They wrote a lot, and I think they grappled with that issue of disinterested friendship. And I
mean,
I
that's a
think,
whole, and for me,
I know
that's a whole, that sounds like someone who's never experienced homosexual feelings writing about what a homosexual should do in order to feel satisfied within a Catholic context. It's like, obviously they don't understand what it's like to be gay and to have those feelings, and then you're just supposed to have disinterested friendships. And I mean, I could talk for hours about that. Like, obviously any sort of connection that you're going to have with somebody is going to start out as a friendship, and then you become more connected, you find more connection. And then as a homosexual, you express yourself in a different way than a heterosexual. And then it blows my mind to hear about that. Like, just have normal friends and you'll feel satisfied. It's like, do you understand what it's like?
I agree with the sentiment there. I mentioned them because I think initially years ago, because I wrote a few things addressing some of the things that they proposed, I was pretty critical. I think now I'm probably a bit more, I'm more sympathetic, because I can see where they were trying to grapple with an issue. And I mean, I've grappled with that too, because most of my friends are gay or don't identify as gay anymore. So I mean, so that's one aspect where people have tried to grapple in Catholicism with the issue. I mean, I've tried, my approach has been much more psychological, is where I do want to look deeper. And I'm beating a dead horse.
And that's
I would, yeah, okay, go ahead.
well, no, that seems like a more sturdy approach. It's like something that's a little bit more grounded. And when you find, like we were saying, like markers or something, when you find things in your past that you can actually put your finger on and approach and confront, and then you can really see what's happening. Because we should never live in in this idea of in ideals, like, oh, so you're feeling homosexual, that means you're a homosexual, you should do this, you should never feel this, you should do that. And it's like you come along with this laundry list of ideas that you have to be. And then if you ever doubt them, then you're doubting your identity, which is something that's a big no-no. On the other side, you have with the Catholic, well, that's, I'm say Catholic because that's my past. You have these list of identities that you have to associate with, and if you doubt them in any way, then you're doubting your identity as a Catholic. And for me, I want to, in my little way, in my limited mental capacity that I have, I want to actually come face to face with what the heck is going on. I don't want to just live in this world of ideas and possibilities and conforming to ideals. Like, I just want to say, who's staring at me in the mirror? And I'm not afraid if tomorrow I wake up and I think differently, or if I find something out that maybe it shines light upon something that was dark before. I'm not afraid of that, but it's something concrete. And I think that's good, what you were saying, that your approach to all of this is more psychological and all of that. I see that and I connect with it.
I think I get, I mean, yeah, you said a lot there. I think I'm
sorry. That's
no,
my
no,
little
no, no,
rant.
no. It's good. I know it's good because you're making me think. It's really good. You know, and my approach worked for me, and it's not necessarily going to work for everybody or a few people or one person. I mean, everybody's different. And I don't think, I mean, people, you know, you have to go into therapy wanting that. I don't think you can go in saying you're gay and you're Catholic, well, you need to go into therapy. Because it could be just traumatizing again for a person. They
That's
have,
interesting.
yeah, it's something they have to want themselves. It's not something they can be talked into or pushed into or cajoled into. But one thing you made me think is that what you said, and I don't know, maybe I was misinterpreting, but I mean, it's within Catholicism, it's difficult, I think, for people who are gay, or SS, like, what space do they occupy within the Catholic Church? I mean, if you're like, say, ex-gay or you had SSA, I guess you could deal with that privately, but especially within the traditional communities, I guess you just kind of have to blend in. You just have to. But a lot of people, and I hate to
But
use
if you're
this, but
single, you're not a priest or religious, you're not married,
well, you
and
stand
you're in your
out.
30s, what's wrong with you?
No, I've been there because, you know, I went to traditional TLM communities as a 30-year-old guy, and yeah, you stand out to a degree because, yeah, you don't have them. I wrote about in my book, you don't have the minivan, and you
Yeah.
know, with the, it's so, you know, but I mean, and I hate to say this, but I mean, some gay people have affectation, and sometimes they will stand out, and they're not going to feel comfortable, so they do gravitate towards these, let's say, gay parishes or these LGBT ministries because they feel comfortable there.
Well, they have a
So
place, they have a purpose, they have like, even what you were saying with courage, you find a connection with people around you, and it's not something that you have to keep secret in order to fit in, to blend in.
you do though. This was one of the things that
Okay, this is
bothered
interesting.
me. This is one of the things that bothered me about courage. And I had a friend, God rest his soul, that was in Courage with me at the time, and he would say to me, he said, Joe, courage is too clandestine. You know, and I used to joke too. I said, it's like an old speakeasy. You got to knock on the door a certain way to get
Oh,
in, because they were always like at out of the way places. They were in the sub basement of the cathedral in San Francisco, in this, you know,
interesting.
in this dark, you know, windowless chamber that like smelled of black mold. And I
Wow.
was thankful to be there, but I really felt like this is the catacombs. You know, the parishes would not advertise where it
Oh, wow.
was, you
Okay.
know, it was very odd. And I felt like the church was ashamed.
Okay,
of
that's
me. And I was
interesting.
given a lot of reasons why that this is so, that for, for security reasons and reasons of confidentiality. And I get that. I get that.
When
But
they're when people are promoting AA meetings and stuff,
and
but that
I've
type of
always,
thing, no.
I've
It's
always
like
been,
you guys go in your little dark closet. You guys go back in the closet.
and I've always been kind of a troublemaker because in the church, and because I was like proposed something, I was like, well, you know what? I get the guys that need some confidentiality, whether they're married to an opposite sex, partner or whatever,
Yeah,
or they have an opposite,
exactly.
that's cool. So let's have the private meeting or the meeting that is not publicly announced or whatever. Let's have that. But I said, some of us are willing to go to a public meeting. I am. Let's have that. Because I said, sometimes with guys, and by then I was ministering in the gay community, and I was like, sometimes a conversion or a doubt is like a moment. It's like, it's not like a process. People will be like, oh, here's this card for a meeting. I think I'm going to go tonight.
Yeah,
Let's check it out.
you never know.
But you can't do that with courage. There's a process. You have to call a priest. You have to,
You have to
sort
get the
of go.
secret passcode. You have to knock 3 times. No.
You do. I mean, and a lot of guys, gay guys, have had past experiences with the church and with priests that have not been good. So they might be super
Just a few?
reticent.
No. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
they
think
might be super reticent about call. They don't want to call a priest.
no.
They,
Well,
but and I have,
that's the whole
sorry.
environment. You're constantly afraid of being exposed because once people find out, they're going to start treating you differently. And it's not that people are specifically saying that, but you see how people are approach the subject of homosexuality in the church and how they talk about homosexuals or the community, and you see how they treat other people and you think, I don't want them to fit me into that box and to talk about me like that. I just would rather be quiet and just feel like I'm a part of the community. So I think that's a big reason why people don't say anything, even to their parents. You hear your dad talking about, oh, this gay guy, blah, 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 and you're like, oh, shoot, I don't want him to know. And I wanted to go back because you said something that was really interesting with the talking about the therapy, that this is something that really alarms went off when I read it in the article, that the whole promotional aspect of this reparative therapy is to help people. The baseline result of the therapy is that you can live a chaste life. So the Catholic ideal, that's the baseline of the whole thing. But the best result is that you change your orientation.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I thought this is going to cause so many problems with people, because they've already, if you're a Catholic and you're homosexual, then you're already trying to reach the baseline, which is hard to stay on, period. So that's already your baseline. There is no below that. Like hell is below that, right? So you're already trying to live that life. So if you go to this therapy, the ideal, you're going for the top. You think God can help me. I have faith that anything is possible. And now there's this possibility of getting rid of these feelings, of changing my orientation, having a family, living this Catholic ideal that I've longed for my whole life. And they're going to go with that expectation, because I don't know about your experience, but when I was in religion, I don't know where this came from, but I had such a big faith I had such hope in the power of God. And even though I stumbled all the time, I always thought this is for something. There's always some purpose. This is all God's just going to keep, like, I had these big ideas, and I imagine myself being in the shoes of maybe the people, young men in the future who are going to have the possibility of this reparative therapy, going in with that same type of idea and how much damage it's going to cause when it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. When I went into therapy, that was not on my radar at all. Actually, and it's still, I mean, I'm still in therapy, and it is not. I have to say that in my case, and I think this has been the situation with other people, is that when you explore the reasons for your homosexual desires, I think they tend to, it's not the right word. I was going to say they tend to lose power, but I think they're just, they tend to decrease. And a part of that is just too with age. I mean, I'm 50. So now I know why I'm attracted. Like I've been attracted to this type of guy. I've been attracted to like an assertive, powerful, man that I would feel protected by and encouraged, and I understand why I'm attracted to that kind of person, because that's a person I wasn't as a kid. That's a person I wished would have been around me when I was a kid. That I was attracted to that type of man. When I did have that sort of mentor or father figure in my life, they usually tend out to be abusive. So it just it just decreases, and for me it has. Now the theory is that as that decreases, the heterosexual desire will increase. Not with me, no, not so much. I mean, but I know guys that were gay and not just had a homosexual desire, never acted. I mean, I knew guys that were actively gay and then later met a woman, married, and have had kids, and they say they have happy and fulfilled lives. Well, who am I to doubt them if that's what they say? And so I'm like, hey, that worked for them. But everybody's different. But I don't think that's the norm. I think it can be, and I mean women too. I mean, if you look at the Mayor de Blasio of New York, his wife, she's really interesting. I mean, she said she was a lesbian, so now she's married to a man. She said she fell in love with a man, married a man, and she's happy and has kids. One of the things I gotta backtrack. One of the things that interested me in homosexuality, because I'm older than you, but when I was in high school in like the late 80s, there was like this 60s revival where the 60s was very hip and chic and that whole culture and everything. If you look at that happens a lot. If you look at like the late 90s, there was like a 70s revival. If you remember that, there was like disco was very, because it was very hot and everything again. So there's always sort of cyclical.
Right.
And as a kid, as a teenager, I was like the 60s, the summer of love and flower power and the hippies. And I was living in San Francisco and the Haight-Ashbury. And part of the ethos of that was, and there was the Gay Manifesto that was written in 1970. I can't remember the guy who wrote it. And part of that was like, we're going to throw off the shackles of bourgeois, Christian, middle class ethos and morality. We can sleep who we want to. We don't have to be married. If I want to sleep with a man, if I want to sleep with a woman, if I want to be in love with a man, if I want to be in love with a woman, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We're getting rid of all this stuff, all these categories, all this stuff. And that like really interested me as a teenager. And that was one of the reasons.
Anybody who says you can do whatever you want, I mean, that would interest anybody,
But I mean, I liked that because I think there was some bisexuality, but I liked that whole thing of like, there's no labels. It's
Okay.
just,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
whoever we are, whoever we're with,
It's all love. It's all love.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I liked. And when I went to San Francisco in the late 80s, there was those guys from the 60s were still kind of there. They hadn't all died of age yet. And so there was still kind of that just free love atmosphere. I liked it. But I mean, as things have gone on, it's become very stratified. So like you're gay, you're straight, and I think that's part, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think that's part of, I think that's part of the muddle that people get into sometimes. Well, if I'm not gay, then I got to be straight, whereas I don't identify as gay anymore because my homosexual attractions have gone down. Does that mean that I'm straight? No. I don't know. It's weird
Well,
because people always ask me that. They go, "Oh, well, Joe, does that mean you're straight now? And like you date women and you want to get married?" I'm like, "No, not really, So it's like, don't put your your
well,
labels
it's
on.
interesting because I've said this many, many times in a lot of videos, excuse me, that I do not relate to the gay movement in mostly all the ways. All of the stereotypical gay things, I just cannot connect with my personality. And I see people that come out ex-gay or anything like that, and in my head, I think what they are saying is they no longer associate themselves with the movement. It's not necessarily that they themselves have changed, but they no longer live in that lifestyle. And if that's the distinction that people make, I understand that. And I completely can see why someone would go from that extreme. And it is an extreme. I actually just mentioned this in one of my past videos, the recent ones, that I see a lot of the people in the gay community as reactionary. Like anything that you said, the manifesto, which is interesting because anything that was traditional, we do the opposite. Any idea that was about family or monogamy or anything like that, we're doing the opposite. And I think that that's how that whole movement started. Now people are being a little bit more, there's more variety, but it's still the principal community is still like that, they still have this openness. Now it's more, you do whatever you think is good for you. It's no longer do all these things that everyone else is doing, but do whatever your limits are, that's good for you, which has its own problems. But I think even though there was that shift, there's still the movement, there's still the label, the identity. And and so when I see someone, I'm ex-gay, that's automatically the idea that I think. Maybe they still have homosexual attraction, but they no longer live that type of lifestyle.
I've used the term just because I didn't know what else to use.
Yeah.
But I think it can mean that. But I think people also see ex-gay as being, you're now straight.
And I think that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid that it's interesting. I thought of this when you were talking before. Through therapy, some people might go into therapy wanting to change their whole orientation, whatever. But I think a lot of what you were saying about maybe the type of man you were attracted to, the situations you were looking for, all of that are more secondary effects of those traumatic events. Maybe not the fundamental attraction, the orientation was affected, but maybe just those those behaviors that you exhibited after the trauma. And those are the things that are kind of, that have subsided now that you've been able to work through the trauma and understand more about who you are and why you do the things you do. Does that seem like a good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. I think part of the reason why too I brought up that stuff about my attraction to like the 1960s ethos is that I think a lot of people nowadays, especially, you know, hook their identity onto their desires. And I don't think, because desires I think can be shifting. And when your identity is linked to that desire, it's probably not going to shift. Or if it does shift, you're going to resist it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, because it's like,
especially at a young age, if you buy in and come out and say, I'm gay, that's
now
wow,
you're always the gay person and you can never change. And
that's tough. And what happens if your desire does shift?
And it does.
Then
I actually just read this article about this guy. He came out when he was 12, and his parents were very progressive, and they're like, yeah, we're so cool, we have a gay kid, and they were promoting him and making him feel comfortable and letting him do whatever. And then when he was 23, he fell in love with a woman. And he was afraid to go back to his parents and tell them that he fell in love with a woman. It's crazy. It's whatever extreme you're on, it's an extreme. Whatever political side, religious side, it puts you in this very strict path. And I understand that people crave structure. I understand that. And it's good to have structure. It's good to have limits. But sometimes it becomes too comfortable, that when, instead of allowing yourself to, I have to be careful exactly what words I use, but maybe you're not seeing everything that's happening.
Yeah.
Because you're always looking at the status quo, and you're not allowing yourself to maybe breathe a little bit, or that's not exactly what I want to say, but you understand what I mean. Like, you're so focused on what you should be that you're not looking at what you're actually dealing with, what the reality is.
Yeah. There's also a lot of societal pressure. I mean, just because a lot of people now come out online.
Yeah.
So
and then
I mean, it was so different for me as a teenager. I had to get myself up, get in the car, go to San Francisco, and that's how you sort of joined the gay community. You did it physically in reality.
Yeah.
And then now there's an online reality where people can come out and then or sometimes, I mean, they have an instant sort of community that is supportive of them, that they belong to. And for kids that are feeling, I mean, gosh, that would have been like nirvana for me. But I mean, for kids that are feeling alienated and disconnected, and then suddenly you have a group of people who, are sympathetic and are supportive, that means a lot. So I mean, for me, it was much more dangerous. I came out in '88. It was a horrible time to come out. The AIDS was super bad. So I had to go down there and come out, and sex was a part of it. And it was scary. I guess it feels a bit more protective and a bit safer online. But I don't know. I think it's difficult. It's difficult for people because there's that rush of support. And that's very
and then it's also that idea, which is something that I connect with, and I understand why people want to label themselves, why they want to identify with a community, because that's something so innate in everybody. They want to feel belonging. They want to have, even if you're just a number, even if they don't really know you as an individual, the fact that you can say, I belong to this group, that gives you purpose. It gives you a way of presenting to the world. And I understand that. And it's funny because, I was very Catholic. I was a priest. I was that person out in the streets that everyone saw me and they're like, oh, that's a religious person because I'm in a black dress with a collar. You know, I stood out like a sore thumb. And I liked it. I liked to identify. I didn't like being the center of attention. That's another thing. But I did like being able to say, I have beliefs and I'm showing everyone in the world what I believe by everything that I am. And I understand that. Now, so many people are like, who are you? Like, what? Because now I'm not necessarily saying what I'm expected to say.
No.
So as a gay person, there's a list of things that you have to say to belong. And maybe I'm not saying all those things. And maybe if I'm a religious person, these are the things that I have to say. And it's like, well, I'm trying to present things in a way that actually expresses what's happening internally, which is a little bit of a lot.
No, I get it. And for people to identify with the group, that comes a lot of times with an ideology. And if they grew up without one, and that means a lot, because I grew up in a very flaky form of Catholicism where kind of anything went, everything was very relative. And when I went to the gay community, there were a certain set of, I don't want to say dogmas, but there were, and that was comforting. So, I believed I'd been born that way, and so at least I believed I had something to believe, and
right. And
it means a lot at the time.
Yeah, it's all just, it's so interesting. And I'm afraid that there's not a lot of people who are removed enough from the situation and the groups in order to really assess what's happening. Everyone is kind of so involved within each of those sides, each of the communities, that they're kind of the way that they think is determined by the ideology. And I mean, how many people are out there like, well, I am this, but I don't connect with that, or I'm this, but I don't connect. And it's like, what's happening? How are the people behaving? I don't know.
When you're in a cult, you don't know you're in a cult.
No.
You don't know, because you surround yourself with other people in the cult. So
yeah, and everyone just kind of gives you confirmation in everything that you believe, everything you say.
Now, I've experienced this online in a double way, is that I would say when I started questioning some things about homosexuality, let's just say the born gay, that you do get pushback because you're going against a dogma. But I mean, I've experienced that as a Catholic too, just going against.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I was kind of a protective mentality, that protects the institution. So it's people have often said you left one cult for another. I go, well, there's some truth into that. So,
well, I mean, there's this is like a whole other subject, but it's good to
it is. You know what? I'm going to interrupt you for a sec. That it's not different, because I think part of therapy and homosexuality is deprogramming.
Okay.
That's a cult term.
Interesting.
It is. I think you need to be deprogrammed a bit. There is that going on, because when I went into therapy, I was like, okay, I was born gay. This is the way I am. You're not going to change anything about me. I'm willing to explore some things about my past, and I'm open to maybe an explanation of why I'm homosexuality, but I'm gay. That's just the way I am, and you're never going to budge me out of it. And I, and through the process of therapy, I said, well, that's probably not true.
So one thing that is interesting for me, like I said before, I never went through any sort of therapy. And you're coming at it from the perspective of leaving the gay community.
Right.
So how do you think a Catholic who is living within that religious environment, who's looking for reparative therapy, how would they approach reparative therapy?
Yeah, I think that's where I think it gets troublesome. This is my opinion. I think where conversion therapy, that really abusive form, I think where it's run into problems, especially in the evangelical world, is that there's a blurring of the lines between mental health and therapy and religion.
Yeah.
They all kind of merge in this toxic soup. And
It's amorphous.
yeah, I don't think that's good, where a particular denomination or church or something had some affiliation with some sort of yeah, that's not good. Or a therapist had some sort of, I would say that if a person has a religious, belief slant, they have a religious belief, they're part of a whatever, church denomination, that's fine. That's their, I don't think it's good that therapy like backpacks on to a religion. I don't know, I'm not articulating this well. I
Well,
mean,
it's almost,
the therapists that I saw were Christian, and I think we talked about religion, but like I said before, my approach was psychological.
Mhm.
I guess you could say scientific. I don't know. The reason I was there was wasn't particularly religious. I mean, that was probably an aspect of it, but I wasn't there because the Catholic Church, or I believe that God was saying that, you can't do this and you can't do that. I was there because I wanted to explore that aspect of myself. It had religious undertones. Well, yeah,
because that's your life. Because
yeah,
that's a part of your experience, is those, has that religion that's a part of it. So you have to touch those subjects. It's almost
yeah.
like,
I don't go to a therapist as a religious practitioner. I'm going to them as a licensed
yeah, it's like everyone
therapist.
has their field of expertise, right? I remember in the traditional community that I was a part of, so many people went to the priest when they should have gone through a therapist.
Probably.
And because in their head, like I don't know if I said it in the podcast or when we were talking, but so many people distrusted therapists, modern therapists, because they considered anybody within this bubble of this community to be trustworthy just from association. And the priest is the head of that bubble. And so he's kind of like the guru. You go to him if you have any problems. And so that was their tendency to do that. And like you said, you go to the priest for spiritual issues. You go to the therapist for mental, you go to the doctor if you broke your arm. Like everyone has their particular expertise, like I said. And what you were just saying about the therapy, I wouldn't want to go to a therapist who had a particular slant to the way that they did their therapy. Like, if I went to a therapist and they just said, "Oh, that's okay. No, it's okay. It's okay to do that. It's okay to do that. Come on, you can do that. You're gay. You can do that. You can go sleep with anybody. You can, and they were just promoting these ideas that as an individual, I don't connect with. I wouldn't want to go to them. The same as if I went to a therapist who was Catholic and everything that they said was promoting and supported by their Catholic beliefs. I'm not saying that what they say has to be against their beliefs, but it's kind of like the impetus of everything that they say is religious. So it's like that mix of the psychological with whatever.
I get it.
Yeah.
I have to say I'll back up one thing, is that I think some of the distrust of the mental health practitioners on the LGBT issue is warranted, because I mean, through my experience and the experience of others, I know that a lot of times when somebody who is gay goes to a therapist or psychiatrist for mental health issues, a lot of times they will diagnose this as some sort of societal or cultural or internalized homophobia.
Mm.
I just know that that's a lot of times what they do, and that they won't explore other aspects of this person's life. They just won't. They won't
Because
do
they're
it.
so clouded with that ideology that they're
Well, all you have to do is read a lot of the current studies, and they won't deny that there's significantly elevated incidence and rates of mental health issues among LGBT people. They can't deny it. But where I take issue with them is where they say is the cause, and they always say it's some sort of homophobia. And I don't think that's true.
and just on the other foot, you know, people are saying that the trauma is the cause of the homosexuality. It's like people are so stuck in their beliefs. Go ahead.
No, I'm not saying there isn't homophobia, and that can cause
there might be something
that can cause mental illness, especially in childhood. That can cause it. I know I was bullied to death as a kid, but there's other things too that deserve to be explored. So yeah, you're exactly right. And one of the things of a blurring of psychology and religion, there is an example in Catholicism. When the McCarrick report came out, that 400-page, I think I was the only.
I would love to talk to you about that.
I'll do it real quick, but I mean, I think I was one of the few people crazy enough to read the whole thing, and I did. And one of the things I noticed that there was a lot of problems is a lot of McCarrick's victims, a lot of them seminarians, priests, were sent to these psychologists who were affiliated with the Catholic Church. Some of these psychologists were Catholic priests. That was a big problem.
Yeah, it's almost like with a psychologist, you would want someone who's third party.
Yeah, you'd think. Yeah, that was a big part of the problem in that whole issue. It's not good. And it's not that a Catholic psychologist can't be wonderful. I know.
I'm not saying that either.
I know some, I know some, but I think in that case, that was really a problem. And I think a Catholic psychologist or psychiatrist can have as a client somebody who's gay, SSA, and I think it can work fine.
Yeah.
I just think I in my personal experience, I think, and I bet they do. I think they shouldn't blur those lines between religion and psychology.
And especially the idea of this particular therapy is with Milo is the result is something that is a Catholic ideal.
Yeah.
So everything about it is we're trying to help you. We're trying to help you live this ideal, whether it's right or wrong. I'm not talking about that. You know, I don't want to touch the subject of, is a chaste life the best option? That's a whole other discussion. It's just, how will that affect that? This is what I'm thinking, because I was in that type of situation. How would that psychologically affect somebody who goes to this therapy, does not have the desired results? How would that affect their whole identity within, even you could say the religious context, but it's almost like it's setting themselves up for disaster.
Yeah. It does. I think if people want to take that route, a psychological route, I think they need to be cautious. Don't don't pick a psychiatrist or therapist out of the phone book, or necessarily, or on the phone book. I'm dating myself, but or
okay.
online. Are online. I mean, look for recommendations, and that's important part of, and I hope we talk about that too. That's an important part of psychological and mental health, is it having a community around you that's like healthy and supportive. I mean, and that doesn't happen. That's why online and coming out online is so attractive, because instantaneously you have
You have
a
your people.
you have a pseudo community. Yeah, you do. um, but building those relationships around you in the real world, it takes time and it takes effort. And I mean, I've been at this for 20 years, and I kind of, it's been like maybe over the last few years that I have finally felt that I have that network, that support. I mean, I lost, I had a bad blow to me a couple of years ago, because I lost two friends close to me, um, suddenly, and it really devastated me psychologically,
Yeah.
really bad, because I'm not married and I don't have kids, and I don't have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. So my friends mean a lot to me. So I mean, eh, I have a family, but they're my family too. And I think they feel the same way, because a lot of them come from the same background. So it's difficult. We do support each other. So when I did lose a couple of them, it's tough. But it's if I didn't have those other friends, thank God they're still here and healthy, that I don't know what I would do. So yeah, you need that. You can't, a lot, I get so many letters from guys and emails and I would say one of the things that, I mean, that are struggling with their sexual orientation, one of the things that's common is they feel alone, and there's
Of course.
there's
Of course.
profound loneliness. And I mean, why? Well, and I know this, one of the reasons they go back to the gay community, or go back to having gay sex, is not necessarily they want to have sex. They're alone and
They
they're
want
lonely.
connection.
Yeah, they want somebody. They want to, I hate to say it, they want a warm body there. They want somebody there. They want a person there.
Yeah.
And then when they do go back, they feel so devastated again, because they're like, oh man, they don't know what to do, and they don't have anybody. So they reach out to me, who's nobody. I'm not there. I mean, I can send them some encouragement. One of the things I do tell them, I said, you got to get some people in your life. You got to get some supportive people. But and a lot of these guys are Catholics, and they do, in the
Yeah.
Catholic Church, where the hell are they going to go? They don't know. And a lot of them, and I've known guys that have been involved in Courage or whatever on their own, tried to live the Catholic teachings, and they end up going to like a gay affirmative Catholic church, or just because they're lonely. At least they're there. They don't necessarily agree with all the ideology that they're spouting about born gay and God made me gay and the church is going to change and all that stuff. But at least it's a community. And
Well, what you were
I
saying
feel
about
sorry. I
courage,
feel sorry.
it seems like that's kind of like an afterthought. Like we're focusing on the normal type of person, like the ideal type of Catholic who has these characteristics, and then these other people who have these issues will, we'll do something for them to make them feel better. Like that's maybe it wasn't that wasn't the intention, but that's kind of the result. That's how it makes people feel. Like even when I was asking you, what was the purpose of courage? What were they giving you? And you couldn't even tell me. It's like we're going to do something to make ourselves feel better, to say, oh, those homosexual people, we'll give them something. But it's like, what are they actually giving? And that's why people go to the communities, the different types of communities. And I get it. I personally am not looking for, at this moment, I'm not trying to find a place that makes me feel like confirm me in my beliefs. I don't think there is one out there right now. I'm kind of in this weird position, um, but when I tried to go into the gay community for just a little short amount of time, I automatically felt uncomfortable.
Hmm.
I thought that, oh, it must be something wrong with me from my past. I'm still dealing with all of those issues. And so like I tried to force it a little bit, and then, tried to
You
like,
thought you were repressed, maybe that you'd been
maybe
repressed.
I was open to a lot of things. My therapist was saying, maybe just see what happens, maybe go to this place, even never telling me to do anything that was beyond my boundaries. But they're just telling me like just being open and seeing what happens. Don't um don't like instinctually say no to things. Like try to
Mm,
figure out why. Why are you saying no? Why is your
mm,
body repulsing in those situations? And I've kind of in the past few years have been living in my own bubble. I have
yeah.
people around me that are similar, which is great. I wasn't expecting to find people like that, but we kind of all are misfits in the community. Like we don't really have our place. We can't identify, and which is good because we're all kind of supporting each other in our decisions.
Well, that's one of the good things I would say about the online the online world is that, I mean, when I came out in '88, the gay community was much more homogeneous. I
Yeah,
mean, you had to come out, you had to go. You weren't going to meet gay guys if you were in a small town because they were probably in the closet too. It
yeah.
was difficult. So you kind of had to go to the gay ghetto. I mean, now with online, there's a lot more niche. I mean, you can probably meet guys that are struggling with their sexual orientation. There's groups, I don't know them because I'm not in that space, but where they can talk and interact and but that the online world only goes so far. I think you need the
I mean, that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm realizing little by little, like the direction of everything that I'm saying. First of all, like it's helping me kind of figure out where I am, because if I'm going to talk about a subject, I have to figure out what the heck I believe. And I'm not afraid to say, I don't know, or I'm still trying to figure it out. But I'm hearing all these stories from different people. Like you were saying, people who wrote you letters. I'm getting similar messages, and they're telling me there was this one guy, and he's has a family, he has children, and he's miserable, absolutely miserable. And the priest that they have isn't helping him. He doesn't like he said the only thing keeping him alive is the fact that he has his family and he loves them. That's the only reason why he hasn't
what
killed himself.
what he has a sexual attraction
SA?
to men. Yeah. Oh, that's okay. Okay.
Yeah, he's gay. He told me he got married because he thought that it would fix him,
Oh,
because the
that's not
priest
good.
told him that it would make him straight.
Whoa. Oh,
Yeah, just really
that's
really sad story. Just a really really sad story. And like you
okay.
said, what can we give to those people? I told them, I'm like, listen, I'm not in any position to tell you what you should do. What I'm listening. I hear you and I'm listening. And you can tell me whatever. It's not going to scandalize me. I'm here to listen to you, and you're not alone. Because that's it. These people isolate themselves, and or they are isolated by their environment, and then it's a miserable existence.
Well, he's in a tough place because he's got to be fearful because if he wasn't honest with his wife about this,
It's so bad. It's so complicated.
I don't even want to think about it. I mean, the guys that I know that have married women, they were open and honest about their feelings and their past way ahead of time,
Yeah.
way ahead of time. So the women went in with their eyes wide open.
And they knew
So
what they were getting into. Yeah.
right,
And I
and
think I
that's
even told this guy, I said, is there any possibility that the more people that know, I think the more, like, especially the people that you trust, like the easier it is to bear a burden when you're with other people.
I
It's
can't.
yeah,
I
it's
I I won't go there. I'm not
It's
qualified.
not, it's not impossible. It's not an impossible situation. I think the problem with isolation is you feel you have this thing that you're dealing with, and everything around you is telling you that it's bad, and you're trying to forget it, but it keeps popping up. And in your head, you create this monster, and it becomes an obsession, and it's all that you ever think about, you obsess about, it overtakes your existence. And when really it's not, it's something that if you were just to face it in a healthy way, I think that it's something that you could really work with and understand. And I think that's the good thing about therapy, is to have that environment that's not associated with anything else in your life, where you can actually just see what's in front of you, see what your past is, see what your decisions are, and really take it apart and understand it. Because part of it is when you're in the darkness, that's where all the monsters are.
Yeah.
And your imagination can create these beasts when you just turn on the light, and you're like, oh, not that it's not a problem, not a big issue or anything, but it's actually like, oh, now I understand what I'm dealing with. I can see the dimensions, I can see how big it is, I can see where it's connected to other parts of my life. And
you're very logical.
Well, I think that's what therapy should be. And anything that's connected with ideologies, with religion, with anything like that, is going to twist the reality into something that, well, it's just going to make it into something that maybe it's not the real issue.
Yeah. Just a couple of things I want to address real quick.
Yeah.
With the situation you were describing with the man who's married, and has children, that's so complicated, because once you involve someone else and you involved innocent children, I don't know. I can pray for that person. The part of therapy that, because when you were describing it, it sounded like really logical. Yeah, that's the way it should work. I have to say, therapy, when you're dealing with issues of like trauma, PTSD, past abuse, it's not fun. It's really tough. It is. I mean, there's been things where my therapist would say, because I would say from the beginning, I was open and honest with the therapist about not getting into any details, but just saying, this is some things that have been traumatic to me and I want to deal with. And then he can say, well, let's talk about that. And I'll just be like, I don't want to talk about it. I can't. I can't. So therapy can be really difficult, really painful. But I think in the long run, I think what you were saying is right. I think it does help, and sort of the monster that's under your bed, I think, finally is revealed. And then, because I think there is so much shame and fear associated with those things that happen to us, especially when we were young, that prevent them from addressing them. And then they do become more powerful.
Well, it's like a Pandora's box. It's like, if I open that part of my life, I know that I'm going to find so much that it's just overwhelming. Like it's easier to just forget about it. Try to forget about it. It's easier. It seems easier in the moment. And I don't know. With this whole idea of therapy, I can't connect with people who have had sexual trauma in their past. I'm sure there's people out there who would say, well, it probably happened when you weren't even conscious yet, or it affected you. But I mean,
but Francis, not everybody that let's say is gay and has gone to therapy has necessarily experienced sexual trauma. It could be other forms of trauma or abuse. There's a lot of subtle forms of abuse.
And this is something I want to talk about. I think that there's this tendency, there's real trauma and there's real issues, and I will never deny someone that.
Let me interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
I just want to unpack the term trauma, because I think a lot of people think of trauma as like sexual trauma or molestation or rape. But I mean, a child feeling rejected by his father, that can be super traumatic for some people.
Yeah, and I think I think that's what most people associate with homosexuality, because it is sexual. They associate the trauma as something being sexual, and like that's what turned you gay. I think that's the common perception of it, and I think that nowadays there's this tendency, because everyone is very into therapy, and going back into the past and pointing the finger at people and parents and bad events that were out of your control in order to rationalize certain behaviors that you have now.
Do you really think people are into that right now?
I see a lot of podcasts, a lot of I think there's this, well, I do this because my parents never gave me affection, so everything that I do now is in order to seek approval by other people. And they actually say that in real conversation. Like,
I don't think, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No,
I've actually had an opposite impression. It seems like a lot of people are like very grounded in the here and now, saying, well, this is going on right now in culture and society, and this is why. I kind of wish people would look backwards more, but go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm just from the podcasts that I've listened to and different articles and conversation, it seems like people want to point the finger at things that were out of their control in order to give the reason why they act the way that they do now. So this is something that you have to be clear about, because there are things about us now that were affected by an environment that was out of our control.
Yeah.
That's true. You can't be black or white. You can't say yes 100% or no 100%. I think that's a good way to approach it. But just like with the whole idea of finding the gay gene, they want to give something it's not something personal. It's not a choice that I have. They want to put all the blame on something out of their control. I see people doing that with anything bad that they experience in their life. They want to bring it back to something that's not their fault, nothing that they did personally. They want to take the culpability out of themselves.
I get it.
Yeah, so that's.
I understand. I think part of that is true. I think especially in childhood, if somebody was abused or neglected, I mean, that is out of their control.
Exactly, and that's something, and it does have effects. Real.
And that does set up certain people. I just know that people that have got into abusive situations when they were older, a lot of them had experienced abuse as kids.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at what point do you say that someone is responsible for their own current situation? I don't know. It's very difficult.
It's interesting. I think that a lot of those people, a lot of the gay people who are in Catholicism or in religion, are going to try to find a reason that's something that they can point to. Like, they're going to try to look and force an event or a situation or something so that they can say, this is the reason why I am gay.
I see.
Even if it's not something as blatant and evident as abuse or something like that, they're going to say, well, my mother was too dominant. It's like, okay, who has a perfect situation, right? Like, who had perfect parents? But I think that I'm afraid that that's how people are going to approach that type of therapy. They're going to say, well, yeah, you're right. Your dad was distant. It's like, well, what male father figure, like what's the stereotype? Like most men are not very emotionally attached to their children. It's like
I know where you're going, because I know a lot of families where there were two or more male siblings, and one of them is gay and another is not. And someone will say, like you said, I had a father that was an SOB, or I had a father that was abusive or absent or neglectful, and I'm not gay. But then it goes back to homosexuality being fairly rare in men. So those situations aren't going to affect everyone in the same way, and they're not all going to have the same outcomes. Although I have to say that a lot of times, and this is anecdotal, a lot of times where there is a gay boy or a man, and a boy that comes out later identifies as LGBT as an adult, and their siblings, especially if there's a male, that male is not gay, but oftentimes the brother. Oftentimes the dysfunction in the family will manifest itself in a different way. Like he'll have problems with female relationships, or he's had multiple marriages, or he's had alcoholism, drug addiction. It manifests. Those are more typical in men than homosexuality. So it's different. And I don't think any therapist, and I don't think a good one will manipulate someone into reaching a conclusion about their homosexuality. Will saying, oh, and my therapist has never done that, has never implanted any kind of thought in my head. Well, your dad was distant, that's why you're gay. I think if a therapist is and I'd say most the ones I've seen have been, if they, I don't know what the word is, not methodical, but if they're organized in their approach to their client, I think the client will reach their own conclusions on their own.
Yeah.
And I did. So I just knew it was a combination of things, mainly environmental, some you could say biological. So, and I just reached that conclusion. And my therapist has never broached it with me.
Yeah.
So.
Even my therapist told me many times, because when I was here in Mexico, during the hardest part of my life, my crisis, I was begging my superiors for a psychologist. I was begging them months and months. Oh yeah, we'll look for someone. But they kept telling me they're looking for someone in the church who's a therapist.
Oh, wow.
And because they didn't want me to be confirmed in my gayness or whatever. I don't know. So
they also probably wanted to keep it in-house.
of course, that was everything. So I was asking when I finally left. That's the first thing I did after getting a job and getting a place. The first thing I did was invest my money in getting my own therapist.
It is an investment, you got to tell people.
Yeah, and it changed my life. And it was harder for me because I had to find an English speaker, because I wanted to be able to express myself in my own language. And I did find someone, and she has been, no pun intended, but a blessing. No. But she never, even though she has, I know her, and I know her personally, so I kind of know kind of her own personal beliefs and convictions and things that I don't necessarily agree with. But always in therapy, she was very distant. She always just drew me to find conclusions myself and to make connections myself and open up different doors to explore different things. And it was never even, I was defensive. And I think it was because of my past. I was like, oh, she's just going to tell me, do this, because now you're gay and now you're against the church. Da, 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 da. Never, none of that. All of that was all, I don't know, just the belief of that community. It was crazy as a whole. But I think that's the best approach to dealing with therapy. You're dealing with an individual who has a different set of circumstances than other people, not having expectations, not telling people these are the possible conclusions after your therapeutical treatment. None of that. Just taking everyone as they are and dealing with the person. I think that's the best way to approach it, not connected to any ideology, religion, LGBTQ affirming therapists or none of that. Just having a place to explore who you are as an individual and what your makeup is as an individual.
Yeah. One thing too I wanted to talk about real quick too. That's really good. You found somebody that's really helpful. One other thing too that people get mad at me for using this term comorbidities, but I'll use it anyway. The thing about especially gay men is that there's comorbidities. There's also issues of depression, other forms of mental illness, suicidality, that need to be addressed too. So there's a lot there.
Yeah, and it seems like for my particular situation, it seemed like, just like with you, in order to kind of figure things out, you had to separate yourself from that community because everything around you was promoting a certain thing that was kind of like clouding your head and putting noise in your head.
Yeah.
And you couldn't even have a second to think. And I feel like even though it wasn't my intention to separate myself from the church and everything, that wasn't like my goal. It did have the effect of kind of separating myself from all of that routine and everything that was bringing me down a really dark path, and being able to kind of objectively see what the heck was going on.
Yeah. One other thing too is that I wish everybody well, but I can't imagine going through this process publicly. I left homosexuality or the gay community in 1999, and then I started, I don't want to say coming out, but I started writing about it publicly in about 2010. So I lived a very quiet, secluded life for about 10 years, where I went to therapy and worked on just a lot of stuff. But so I can't imagine doing it publicly.
I think it's important because no one ever talks about it. They use it in the past tense, like this was my process, or this was, but people are going through that process now. And I think it's good. I
think it would have been, I think I would have felt a lot of pressure.
Oh, yeah. I think at this point, I'm separated so much from my people pleasing past.
Well, there's some people waiting for you to fall.
Oh, of course.
And not just you, but other people too.
Yeah. I think it's good because I did have a few years where I was going to therapy and I was trying to figure things out. I've already been through all of this in my past because I wrote my book, which took a lot of reflection and thinking about things. So in a sense, I have gone through like some sort of preparatory work. And it's not necessarily that I'm going through a process right now of like I don't really know where I stand, because I do have certain ideas now. And those are the ideas that I say online. So there is something that I have a footing on. But I think everybody in life is going through a process, and they're all trying to figure things out. And it's something that's going to go on until we die. So I think that that's kind of what I'm expressing now in certain things, certain discussions that I'm having, conversations, as they come up like this with reparative therapy. It's not something that I was looking for before, but it just came up.
That's why I think it's fundamental too, that people have a support network. But you're kind of like me, you're kind of in between worlds, because like me, you don't have the support of the institutional church, and you don't have the support of the LGBT community, whatever that is. So you kind of have to build your own.
Which is fun, because
yeah, but it's difficult. But you don't want like sycophants who just the best friends are those who tell you what you don't want to hear. And I definitely have those.
And that's me too. And I can say that my friends, I don't agree with everything they do. They don't agree with me with everything I do. We don't have the same beliefs. We don't follow the same ideology, but we're open to the other person, and we listen to the other person. And no matter what your ideas are, if you need help, I'm here for you.
One of the reasons I've had a problem with the Catholic approach to homosexuality or any of the LGBTQ community is that I think people a lot of times are coming from a place of trauma and abuse. And I think you need I don't want to use that word, safe space. I think you need a space in which you feel comfortable and which you feel somewhat protected. I mean, you can't be in a cocoon, but I think, is it too much to demand from a religious organization that I'm not going to be abused within that organization? Well, is that too much? Is that too much to demand? I feel like in Catholicism it is. I'm asking too much. So a lot of, so that why I've had a problem with the Catholic approach is that when someone who is gay or LGBTQ, for whatever reason, approaches the Catholic Church, it's going to be a confusing miasma of voices. Like you mentioned, James Martin. It is not. You need to be prepared. And a lot of people aren't. I wasn't. I was wounded. I didn't have the time. I didn't have the strength to wade through a lot of garbage. But that's what the Catholic Church is asking these people to do. And that's why I told the Catholic priest, I haven't for several years recommended Catholicism in my ministry to people. I mean, I haven't recommended. I recommend our Lord Jesus Christ, but I haven't recommended any organized religion. So
yeah, it's
and I think I think the online world has mirrored that. It's cruel. Yeah. It's not helpful. It's not protective, and it's not a place where you're not going to be re-victimized.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. That's important for people to hear. It's important for people to hear that, because I think a lot of people just put themselves, like we were saying before about the victims, how they expose, how like what situations do they put themselves in order to be revisited by memories, bad traumas, like this, all of those people who are having those feelings that are out there in social media, like those are real. I hate to use this word triggers, but they are.
Yeah, it is. It is.
And it's almost like the social media world feeds on trauma. And so the more trauma, the more triggers, the more response from people, the better for them.
One of the revelations that was brought to me in therapy was that in my adult life, I recreated or replayed the abuse, even down to the venue, because as a boy, I was assaulted and abused in a public bathroom and in a car.
Okay.
And I did that as a gay man over and over again. I couldn't figure that out.
It wasn't
So,
until that connection was made.
yeah, then I thought,
Oh,
oh wow, that's why I keep doing this with the same type of person, you know. So it's a lot. I wish everyone well. That
good luck.
no. I mean, I guess the moral of the story is that people should be free to explore, and I said this, whatever aspects of their mental health that they want to explore. And I don't think it should be stigmatized. I think it's too bad that there are gay activists that want to stigmatize people as ex-gay or looking for conversion therapy, when I don't think that's the case. So
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think something that my mom always told me was she didn't care if I ended up homeless or without a job or struggling, or she said all of that temporal stuff, it doesn't matter. She said the only thing I want you to learn from me and your dad is to be awake and aware. That's the only, if that's the only thing you get from us, then she did her job. Like that's what she said. She said, I don't want you to go through the world just being influenced and pulled one way or another, or just, centered, seeing reality and really understanding what's happening around you. I think that's a good approach to whatever you do in life. Go to therapy, go whatever. You're in control. You can see what's happening. You can reflect in what's happening inside, the people around you, what they're saying, your own reactions in those moments, and just see what's happening, because that's the first step before you do something. You have to see, assess, and then you can act.
that's good. She gave you good advice.
Oh, the best. The best. But anyway, is there anything else that you want to add?
We talked a lot.
Yeah, almost 3 hours.
Are you serious? Wow. See, it went by really fast.
I know. We could do this. I was thinking it'd be interesting if we started like something more regular and cover all these subjects, because although maybe in the present moment, people on the outside would say that we're in totally different lifestyles, I think there's a lot of things that we kind of see eye to eye on, or that we can complement each other.
Yeah. I think I think like me, you're kind of open and honest to a fault. And I think what I've tried to do is, like you said that earlier, maybe I'll end it with this. You said you'd never tried to convince anyone. And I never either. I just told my story. A lot of people didn't like it. And I was really honest about it. But take it as you will. This was my experience in the gay community. This has been my experience in the Catholic Church. This has been my experience, seeking out therapy, and it is what it is. So,
well, I know that I would have appreciated hearing your story before. It was never something that was that never came across my path, and I know that people from my past are now talking about things that they've never talked about because of me.
Yep.
So, sorry everybody. But no, it's good. And thank you so much for coming on and giving your perspective. I know that there's endless hours that we could go into all the details or other subjects, but I think it's a good summary of the subject. And
I think so too.
yeah, and I'll be interested to hear what people have to say. Not everyone.